Have you ever wondered about the origin of your family name? When it first appeared and how it came about? Have you ever questioned the heritage of your last name? If not, I'm here to tell you that there's a very high chance your family name is a direct product of the patriarchy, and that rules around last name are still highly sexist. When I discovered this, I decided to change my name altogether. And the process hasn't been easy. In this video, I will tell you all about why we have a family name and why women are still carrying century-old patriarchal custom on their ID. Let's go! Let me tell you how this all came about. I have to make a confession. I never liked my family name. It's gonna sound extremely shallow, but whatever. I hated hearing people saying my name. First of all, because it clashes so much with my first name. My first name, Françoise, is very, very French, even though no connection. And my last name is very, very Italian. And when I was living in Belgium, people were always putting this fake, strong Italian accent just to say my family name. And they would be like, oh, is that how we say it? And I'd be like... But when I moved to the UK, it became a whole new problem. With a very French first name and a very Italian last name, people just didn't know how to pronounce that. And some people still struggle to say Françoise properly, even though they're my mates. But add the very Italian last name and people wouldn't even try. Okay, I'm definitely not suggesting that you should change your name because people can't pronounce it. If you're attached to your name and people can't pronounce it, well, that's their problem. I'm sure you will assert yourself and make sure to correct them until they get it right. But that's not my story. I don't like my family name. I have no attachment to being Italian. Because I'm a third-generation Italian migrant in Belgium, the Italian culture I was shown was one that was extremely sexist. Because my grandparents left Sicily in the 1950s, they were definitely still stuck in that mindset, and it just didn't evolve. I already knew there was something wrong in that, and I just rejected it altogether. My Italian last name explains where I come from, but it doesn't define who I am. I'm sure that there's a much broader conversation to have about heritage and its way on identities, how much we have to carry, and how much we can potentially leave behind. And I don't think we're all equal in that choice. Obviously, some of my heritage I can't leave behind, and those are the physical markers of my ethnicities. Lovely skin, beautiful hair. I could be from anywhere in South Europe. But once again, I've always thought about it as an explanation of where I came from, but not so much something that was defining me. So that's one thing. Then, like a significant majority of people born in the Western world, I was given my dad's family name. And actually at the time, my parents didn't have any choice to make. Because in Belgium, until 2015, the law stated that any child born as a Belgian would have to be given their dad's family name. In 2015, they slightly changed the law, and now it says that any child born as a Belgian would have to be given either their dad's name, their mum's name, or a mixture of both. Which I think is a bit of a non-choice, and I will explain why. This law hasn't made any changes in how people are naming their kids, because over 90% of children who were born since 2015 are still given their dad's family name. But let's rewind for a second and look at why we have a family name. So, in Europe, before the 11th century, everybody was known as their baptism name. But with the new demographic boom, it all changed. There were too many Marys and too many Johns, and nobody knew who they were talking about. So people started to give each other another name to differentiate all the Marys and all the Johns. And that's how the first last name appeared. Apparently, there were 4 different groups of family name, either based on where you lived, what was your profession or your social status, who was your dad, or a nickname that really, really stuck. Those very first last names were proper to each individual, and so were never really passed on. Then, in the 16th century England, it all changed, with Henry VIII. Wait, does that ring a bell? Oh yeah, the guy had 6 wives and many mistresses. He was obsessed with having a male heir to the throne, which made him behead 2 of his wives and cancel 2 of his weddings. Definitely an ally. So my guy Henry finds nothing better to do between all the fucking and the beheading than to pass an order that said that all marital births had to be recorded under the father's name. And this is how, in the 16th century, the family name came about in England. In the rest of Central Europe, the history is probably much less dramatic, but it seems that there's a shift in the 16th century towards giving the father's name to every child that is born. And in some countries, they also pass a law that says that once a name is given, you can't change it. I mean, I kind of understand how fucking annoying to have to keep track of every change of name when all you have to work with is a quill and a piece of parchment. Ah bah non, hein, Michel, j'ai écrit le con, ça reste le con. Bonne journée! Apparently that's an issue that really bothered the French, and François Ier actually passed that law in France. But there's no trace of such a law in England, and that's important for our story. So nobody changes their name, ever. Nobody? What about women when they get married? Right, so traditionally when a woman gets married, she takes on the last name of her now husband. This custom was first introduced in the 14th century as the doctrine of coverture, which basically means that a wife is part of the possession of her husband. The idea of a wife being part of the possessions of her husband is obviously outdated, right? But let's note that for a very long time, and until recently, the beginning of the 20th century, wives were not allowed to open a bank account or own their own house unless their husband would agree to it. So, not a possession, but definitely under supervision. How are the plans for next year's wedding coming along, darling? In the 15th century, the doctrine of coverture got a marketing reboot thanks to a very sexy religious twist. Taking the husband's name was now seen as the unity of the couple, two becoming one under the eye of God. And obviously the one was the husband. By the 17th century, the practice of taking the husband's last name becomes custom. And people were not even thinking about it because they had civil war to fight. Nowadays, when you get married in the UK, you can either keep your last name, take your husband's last name, do a mix of both, or even completely change it to something that you choose together. And when you have children, you can either pass your last name, your husband's last name, or the new last name that you chose for yourselves. It's interesting to note that nearly all women, when they get married, still take their husband's name, about 90% in 2016. And most kids, when they're born, are still given their dad's last name. Since the beginning of feminism, women have questioned the practice of marriage and the customary change of name. Many women, when they get married, keep their last name as an act of rebellion. Because, yes, marriage has also got a little bit of a marketing reboot. This time focusing on love, affection, and companionship, with clear fiscal benefits for the highest earner. You know what I mean. You can see now and then press articles about women wanting to keep their last name when they get married, or wanting to pass on their last name to their kids, or even more newsworthy, husbands who would take their wife's last name. Progress, right? It's not that easy. Because as I said earlier, your family name is a direct product of a 16th century law that said that all marital births had to be recorded under the father's name. So if Jane wanted to give Mini Jane her own last name, well, she would just be passing on a dad's name, and a dad's name, and a dad's name, and a dad's name, and a dad's name. But what about if I really like my name? And what about if my name is just nicer than my husband? And what about if I don't have any daddy issue, not like... Okay, I have a great relationship with my dad, just so you know. I'm pointing this out for two reasons. One, to show the systemic aspect of this issue. So even if you think you're making a feminist choice by passing on your own last name, well, you're still part of the system that is promoting the name of men rather than women. And if you think about it, women have never really had their own last name. Two, to actually promote freedom of choice. When women decide to keep their name or pass on their name to their kids, I think it's brilliant. I'm really not here to judge individuals, but more the system. I'm totally cool with people choosing. But why do we have to stop there? Why can't we let people just choose their own name? And this is the predicament I find myself in. In the UK, land of do whatever the fuck you want with your private life, we don't care, anybody aged 16 or over can just decide to use a different name. And they can do so unless they're doing that for a fraudulent reason or illegal reason. Just pick a name and use it. No problemo. To make this change official, so to change the name on their passport, they need to get a deed poll, which is a pretty straightforward piece of admin that is done in no time and for a small fee. There's quite an interesting article on Vice that was written a few years back about why young people are changing their name in mass, and I will link it down below. So that's for the UK, the country I call home since 2012. But I'm not a citizen of the United Kingdom. I am a citizen of the Kingdom of Belgium. And in Belgium, independent piece of land disputed by the French and the Dutch for many centuries. It's a whole other story. We've adopted the French état civil that says that once you're given a name, your name is your name and you can't change it. A change of name is not a personal matter, it's a public one. Therefore, if you really want to change your name, you have to contact the Federal Public Justice Service in writing with a serious motive for this change. Currently, only 4 acceptable on their website. How do you think fuck the patriarchy is gonna go down on a scale? This most serious request is then passed on to His Majesty the King of the Belgians, the daddy of all the Belgian dads, who will allow it or not. And it's very clearly written on the Federal Public Justice Service website that this is by no means a right and only a favour. The gap between the UK and Belgium is much deeper than the North Sea. So where does that leave me? Well, I live in the UK. So I thought, fuck it, I'll change my name and start using a new name. My name is Françoise Fracas. I choose it myself, and I love it. The only few reactions I got were, oh my god, did you get married? I guess now I can just send him the link of this video. And in Belgium, well, I do sign my creative work with my new name. They can think it's a pseudonym or nom de plume. But officially nothing has changed. My dad's last name is still on my passport, and if I have to make an official request for anything, I still have to use that name, which, yes, it's quite bothering. Maybe things will change eventually, because I'm actually consulting with a lawyer in Belgium to see if we can change this really archaic law. So maybe I should have kept it on the DL. But I wanted to make this video to show how much our last name is cultural. If you change place and time in the world, you find completely different customs. And because our last name are cultural things, they have evolved over time and will evolve again. So I really can't see why we couldn't have a feminist revolution about family names. Thanks for watching this video. I will link down below some more resources about customs, traditions and family names. Do let me know if this is an issue close to your heart. Are you a UK citizen who changed their last name by deed poll? Or are you Belgian and you're also trying to swim against the tide? Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Instagram. I'll see you very soon with a new video. Ciao!